I'm a massive fan of Dragon's Rising Season 2, and a large part of why is the motion versus strength dichotomy the season gives us. Throughout the season, we get presented with these differing ideologies and worldviews, and we get to see how they oppose one another through the character interactions and the main character arcs of the season. The second season of Dragon's Rising's main story arcs are Aaron's slow turn to Raz's side as he fails to harmonise with what the world wants from him, and Lloyd trying to find his place in the world and overcome his visions and lead the ninja team against Raz. Each of these arcs gives us a concrete idea of what each principle entails. Motion invokes the idea that the universe is never completely still, and involves aligning yourself to the movement of the world to better yourself. Strength, on the other hand, is a forceful overpowering of the world's motion, taking what you need from it to carve your own path in life in a stark contrast to motion. We get to see the principles of motion be developed for the first half of the season through both Lloyd and Aaron trying to master it, but come part 2, we get a full look into what strength offers as Aaron gets more and more disillusioned through the ninja's own inadequacies, as he starts shifting over to Raz's side throughout the tournament. The way the season takes the ideas of two of the Source Dragons and makes an entire season dedicated to fleshing them out and opposing them, giving us a nuanced view of what each one has to offer, is absolutely brilliant in my opinion. So when it became clear that Season 3's dichotomy was going to be focus versus chaos, I was really curious to see what they were going to do with it while also developing the themes of motion and strength. Come Season 3 though, we get basically nothing about how these two extremes oppose each other, and neither one feels like it was properly developed in the slightest. Glenn Lakin, one of the writers currently working on Dragon's Rising, recently revealed which elemental power is under each Source Dragon over on Blue Sky, and we got a definition for what focus is meant to represent in the world of Ninjago. From this, we know that focus is a hard contrast to flow, and the stillness of focus brings clarity, and to act without it invites chaos. This is a really interesting dichotomy on paper, and the idea of acting without focus would be a great thing to add on to the Raz and Aaron dynamic, especially since it's Aaron's compulsiveness that led him to try and save Raz in elements of betrayal. Seeing Aaron try to remain focused on the task of finding his parents and using focus to stop himself from straying too far from what he believes in would have made for some really compelling stuff, and it would have been interesting to see something like focus thrown into the mix of strength and motion. Come to think of it, tying focus back to the ninja team also would have been an absolute slam dunk follow up to their story. What with their focus on saving the world being somewhat detrimental to their team dynamics and relationships, what with one of their new recruits just up and leaving them because he was tired of the search for his parents being an afterthought. Unfortunately, what we get of focus within the season is very shoehorned in, and ironically enough, does not get the focus it deserves within the story of Dragon's Rising. The relevance of focus this season amounts to the characters saying that they need to focus a lot in the final 2 episodes, but is completely meaningless when the show itself never puts any effort into developing what it actually means. Blue Sky posts from the writers, which exists to delve a bit deeper than the show can, just isn't enough for me to feel satisfied with the dichotomy this season gives us, and having the definition just not be in the show at all is such a waste in my opinion. While supplementary info through Blue Sky posts is really cool to get, and I understand why it doesn't always slot naturally into the story of the show, Dragon's Rising Season 2 still did a wonderful job of developing its core principles, so I don't think I'm holding the show to an unreasonably high standard by wanting more from the focus versus chaos dichotomy when the show is clearly more than capable of doing stuff like this. The lack of development that they give this dichotomy has led me to believe that they just didn't choose a particularly good source of this season's themes, because despite being the polar opposite to focus, I think Flow would have made for a far better opposition to chaos, and it would have really added to the overall themes that this season has going for it. As defined by Glenn Lakin himself, flow is a rebellion against stillness, meaning that one has to be ever changing and adapting to adopt it. If any of you have read Brutality, you'll know that within that story, the concept of flow is very similar to how Glenn describes it, with a key add-on being that it's a middle ground between strength and motion, with its adaptive nature giving it the ability to shape the world around it without taking, while also drawing from its motion, allowing its users to tap into Dragon Spinjitzu. Even just going off of Glenn's definition, being able to adapt in a flow state of sorts sounds like a far better thing to oppose chaos than something that involves stillness, and if they did end up going down the brutality route of flow being a middle ground between strength and motion, it would have been way more interesting than focus, especially when both of Thunderfang's defeats involve Aaron finding his place among the different principles he's been given. I don't think that focus is particularly bad as an opposition to chaos, and had they bothered to develop it, I think it could have been a really interesting dichotomy to pursue, but with how much Dragon's Rising has had the characters deal with chaos in the past, it seems like everything was building up for Flow to take center stage this season, making the sudden shift to focus feel like a bit of a diversion from what the show had been setting up since season 1. One way they could have integrated focus naturally into the story if they did want to go down this route is through Lloyd. His whole story in Dragon's Rising Season 2 is him trying to find his place within the motion of the universe to overcome his visions and find his footing as a master, which lets us delve into his anxiety as he worries about failing his team and letting his visions take over his life. I don't usually use anecdotal evidence in videos, but I am someone who tends to get quite anxious and stressed out, and focus is something that I found helps me overcome that. Whether it be a breathing exercise or something that involves concentrating on what's around me, focus plays a large part in how I manage my stress, and I think Lloyd's character this season would have really benefited from tying Lloyd's struggles into the concept of focus. Lloyd's visions being completely gone is one of the biggest issues I have with his character in Dragons Rising Season 3, and the more I think about it, the more the lack of them is completely baffling to me when they had two easy shoo-ins for this season. I won't talk about the first one that I noticed because that's a topic for another time, and I will talk about it eventually, but it would have been so easy for them to tie Lloyd's anxiety into him finding new ways to control his visions through breathing exercises, which would involve him being focused. Lloyd was a great character to tell the ideals of motion through, and I think he would have been a great pick to develop focus through as well. It's a real shame because Lloyd's visions being almost completely gone isn't just a knock on his characterization, but on the main season conflict as a whole. I don't think Season 3's dichotomy not getting the focus it deserves is some massive season ruining issue, but I do think it's unfortunately one of those areas where I think they really failed to follow up on the pretty perfect setup that was Dragons Rising Season 2. The most egregious part of its absence is definitely the fact that it could have so easily tied it into Lloyd's anxiety/vision storyline, because the only vision we get doesn't pertain to focus in the slightest and isn't used in a particularly compelling manner when it essentially serves as a way to forward the Archdragon Awakening plotline. This season not having a well-defined and concrete dichotomy definitely played into my initial distaste towards this season, and why I initially described part 1 as hollow. It's by no means a season ruiner, and I don't think I would even be talking about this topic had Dragons Rising Season 2 not done such a fantastic job with its themes and ideals, but unfortunately Dragons Rising Season 2 just raised the bar for what this show can and could be, and I don't think holding this season to the same standard is unreasonable by any means. I really hope that Season 4 does more of its themes, and I would really like for Season 3's weak dichotomy to be a weird outlier, instead of Season 2 setting a standard that the show just cannot maintain. With all that being said, I believe that's about everything I have to say about Dragons Rising Season 3 and its failure to develop focus. Thank you all for watching this video. The support I've been getting recently has been absolutely insane, and I cannot thank you guys enough. If you do want some more insane Ninjago takes from me, feel free to join my Discord server for Digiverse. There will be a link to it in the description, and there should be one on screen now. I'd also like to give a massive shout out to Gino for Rising Brutality, and if it does interest you and you do want to read it, there is a Discord server for it that he made recently where you can read it and talk about it with other readers, so a link to that will also be in the description, and there should be one on screen now. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye for now. Maybe Lloyd's visions are gone because they aren't real though. Perhaps it's all an elaborate ruse to abuse stimulants.
When you feel tired, look at yourself. Inside your heart, you will find a special place to align. When you feel right, look at yourself. Inside your mind, you will see, 'cause make it to me.